Think about that person again. See them think about the last time you said something honest, and they just went quiet. No argument, no raised voice, just a stillness that somehow made you feel wrong. You spent the next hour replaying it, adjusting your tone and your memory, wondering if you should apologize for telling the truth. This video is not about people who hurt you loudly. It is about the ones who hurt you in complete silence. Because the person who screams at you is easy to identify. The person this video is about is not easy to name at all. They remember your birthday. They show up when it counts. They have never once called you a cruel name. And yet, something about being close to them leaves you smaller every time. You feel it most after conversations that should have felt normal. You walked away feeling vaguely ashamed, without knowing exactly why. The confusion is the point. When someone hurts you loudly, you know what happened. When someone hurts you quietly, your brain spends its energy searching for the source, instead of protecting you from it. And while your brain is searching, the pattern continues. Because you never named it. Because nothing they did was ever quite enough to point it directly. That is not an accident. That is a design. Clearly now, not as someone who wanted to hurt you. Think about the specific ways it shows up. The conversation where you expressed a feeling, and they responded with a fact. Not cruelty, just a redirection that left your emotion with nowhere to land. Or the moment you achieved something, and their response was technically positive, but delivered with a flatness so complete that you left feeling worse than before you shared it. There's a name for what you have been experiencing. And once you understand the psychology behind it, you will never interact with this person the same way again. The silence after your honesty is not emotional unavailability. It is a control mechanism. Warmth is being withdrawn as a correction tool to teach you that certain feelings, certain versions of yourself, produce a specific consequence. Your nervous system learned the lesson, even if your conscious mind never did, which is why you started editing yourself around this person long before you realized you were doing it. You stopped bringing up certain topics. You started framing your feelings as questions. You learned to read the temperature of the room before you spoke. That adjustment feels like social intelligence. It is not. It is fear, dressed in the language of consideration. The second pattern is the reframe. You describe something that hurt you, and before you finish the sentence, they have already explained to you what you actually felt. Always calm, always reasonable, always delivered with a patience that makes you feel ungrateful for questioning it. This is the psychology of reality erosion. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a slow replacement of your internal record with their version of events. The third pattern is selective memory. They remember every mistake you made, every time you fell short, every moment you were less than what they needed. And they forget completely and consistently every time they did the same. When you point this out, they do not argue. They simply look confused, or patient, or slightly sad that you would bring something like that up. And you are left holding the weight of an accusation you never made, apologizing for perception they just made you feel ashamed of having. The fourth pattern is the emotional tax. Every time you need something from this relationship, there's a cost, not stated, never stated, but felt in the shift of energy that follows. The slight withdrawal, the reduced warmth, the way the room changes after you ask for something that should have been freely given. Over time, you stop asking, not because the need went away, because the tax became too high. And that is exactly what the pattern was designed to produce. A version of you that has learned to need less so they never have to give more. Go back to that moment at the beginning. The silence after you spoke honestly. Your nervous system registered something in that silence, long before your mind could name it. It was not discomfort. It was a signal. The signal that this relationship operated on a set of rules that only one person wrote. The fifth pattern is the exhaustion transfer. After enough time close to this person, you start to feel tired in ways you cannot explain. Not physically, something deeper. A heaviness that arrives specifically in the context of this relationship and lifts the moment you are away from it. Most people blame themselves for this. They assume they are being too sensitive, too demanding, too much. The psychology says something completely different. Your brain is exhausted because it has been on alert the entire time, scanning for signals, predicting the next shift. Try to maintain safety in an environment where the rules keep changing with no announcement and no explanation. And the cruelest part of this pattern is what it does to your relationship with yourself. Because when the person causing this damage presents as calm, caring, and reasonable, your brain has only one other explanation for why things feel so wrong. The pattern you have been living inside has a name. It is called covert control, and it is the most psychologically damaging relationship dynamic most people will ever experience, precisely because it leaves no visible marks. Covert control does not require anger. It does not require abuse in any form that courts recognize or that friends would believe. It requires only a consistent pattern that teaches the other person to make themselves smaller, while believing the choice was entirely their own. The person running this pattern is not always aware they are running it. The behavior was likely installed in them the same way it is being installed in you, through a relationship earlier in their life, where withdrawal of warmth was used as a correction tool. That does not make it acceptable. It makes it explainable. And the distinction matters, because understanding the origin of a pattern is how you stop taking it as a verdict on your worth. Because here is what covert control requires to work. It requires you to keep treating the withdrawal as information about your value, rather than information about their pattern. The moment you stop doing that, the entire mechanism loses its power. So what do you actually do? Not the leave immediately version, not the dramatic confrontation version, the version that is actually available to you right now. The first thing is to rebuild your internal record. Every time this person reframed your experience, redirected your emotion, or responded to your honesty with silence, your internal record of what actually happened got quietly overwritten. You need to start trusting it again. This means when something feels wrong, you let it feel wrong. You do not immediately look for the explanation that makes you the problem. The second thing is to stop explaining yourself to someone who has demonstrated they will reframe the explanation. You are not unclear. You do not need better words. The issue is not your ability to communicate. The issue is that your communication is being received by someone with an investment in not understanding it. The third thing is to notice the editing. Every time you catch yourself softening a truth before you say it to this person, pausing before a feeling, reframing a need as a question, that is data, not about your sensitivity, about the training that has been running in this relationship. The fourth thing is to map the energy exchange. Map the last 10 significant interactions with this person honestly. Not what was said, what cost you, what gave you. The map will tell you what words cannot. The fifth thing is the hardest. You have to grieve the relationship you thought you had. Not the one that exists, but the one you believed existed. The one that was always just slightly out of reach. That relationship was never there. And the reaching for it was part of how the pattern kept you in place. Because the people who stay longest in these dynamics are not weak. They're the most empathetic people in the room. Their empathy is being used against them, not always consciously, but consistently. So the work is not to become less empathetic. It is to direct that same empathy inward. To look at yourself with the same generosity you have been extending to the person who has been quietly teaching you to make yourself smaller. The most lasting damage of this pattern is not what they did to you inside the relationship. It is what you learn to do to yourself outside of it. The self-editing that started as a survival strategy became the default way you move through every relationship. You brought the pattern with you, not because you were damaged, because your nervous system is efficient. It learned a rule in one environment and applied it everywhere. And knowing that is how you start to update the rule. Think about that person again, the one whose silence taught your nervous system what honesty costs. See them clearly now, not as someone with power over you, but as someone who learned to control their environment through withdrawal, because at some point in their own life, that was the only tool available to them. Their silence was never a verdict on your worth. It was a mechanism, and you have been treating a mechanism as a mirror. You're not too much. You're not too sensitive. You're someone whose nervous system has been running a threat response in a situation that was quietly designed to produce one. The most dangerous person in your life has never raised their voice at you. They never needed to. They had something far more powerful than anger. They had your own empathy, and they had your silence. And they had the version of you that kept trying to be less, so they could finally be enough. The only question left is this. Now that you can see the pattern clearly, are you going to keep editing yourself for someone who is never going to approve the final version anyway?